When you stop explaining, respect arrives. Stop scrolling for a second, because what I'm about to tell you can change the way you stand in the world. First of all, subscribe to the channel now, because you can't keep living without understanding the silent power of dignity. There comes a point in your life when you get tired of justifying who you are, tired of explaining yourself to people who don't even deserve to know your details, tired of trying to prove something to those who never had the capacity to see. And it's exactly in that moment, when you close the door on explanations, that the world changes its tone with you. There is a force that is born when you stay silent, a presence that grows when you stop arguing, a subtle light impossible to ignore when you refuse to beg for understanding. And this power has always been there, waiting for you to stop explaining yourself. But here is what no one ever told you. The more you chase being understood, the less respected you become. And when you finally release the need to convince, respect arrives like an inevitable echo, like a shadow that should always have walked by your side. If this has touched you so far, comment now. Silence is strength. I want to feel that you are here. Theme: the value of silent dignity. There is a moment in life when you realize that no one really understands what is happening inside you. And ironically, that's exactly when you begin to free yourself. Because the greatest prison is not other people's expectations, but your own obsession with trying to explain every gesture, every thought, every choice. Dignity begins at the very point where you give yourself permission to be silent, even when you could speak, to remain serene, even when you could react, to keep walking, even when the world demands you stop to justify your journey. Silence becomes your shield, your strategy, your declaration of strength. It's curious how respect changes direction when you master this art. The people who once pressured you, tested you, poked you, start to look at you differently, not because you've become unreachable, but because they feel that there is something deeper in your presence, something that cannot be manipulated. When you no longer need to explain, you emanate something that few people can handle: self-conviction. That aura changes everything. Silent dignity is much more than not speaking. It is refusing to negotiate your peace. It is refusing to prove your intentions. It is refusing to let external noise invade your center. While the world lives in a war to be heard, you learn to win without raising your voice. And that creates an impact that doesn't depend on applause, validation, or approval. People begin to notice that there is something in you that cannot be bent. And that bothers some, but inspires many. Over time, you begin to realize that over-explaining is not kindness. It is insecurity. It is fear of being misunderstood. It is the desire to be accepted. And when that realization finally hits, when you finally admit that you spent years trying to clarify your soul to eyes that were never able to see you, an unexpected peace finds you. Suddenly you understand that your role is not to convince anyone. Your role is to be whole, even if silently. If this makes sense to you, subscribe to the channel now and comment, "I choose the silence that protects me." Your gesture keeps this message alive. And then comes the most powerful part. When you stop justifying yourself, your presence starts to speak for you. Your behavior communicates more than any explanation. Your absence does too. Your decisions echo. Your silence weighs. People sense that there is a certainty inside you that doesn't need words. It's not arrogance. It's emotional maturity. It's the strength of someone who no longer begs for understanding. All your life they tried to teach you that being clear, transparent, explanatory was the right way. But no one told you that this would make you vulnerable to people who only wanted access to your energy, not your truth. And when you set a boundary, when you refuse to open doors that you used to leave wide open, that boundary becomes your new standard of respect. Whoever wants to keep walking by your side will have to do so without demanding that you strip emotionally. There is a nobility in silence that only those who have suffered from over-explaining can understand. It is the nobility of someone who knows that many times explaining oneself is stepping down to a level that does not honor one's own conscience. It is offering pearls to the wind. It is spending energy on those who do not know the value of what they receive. When you learn this lesson, something inside you changes irreversibly. Silent dignity is, in truth, an inner revolution. It is leaving behind the version of yourself that begged to be seen, that begged to be understood, that suffered from being misinterpreted. Now you don't need that anymore. Now you speak less and observe more, act more and react less, live more and explain almost nothing, because those who truly perceive you in silence. But here is the final detail. When you stop explaining yourself, you make it clear that your value is not open for debate, and that is what finally makes respect appear, not because you changed, but because you stopped shrinking yourself. There is something that almost no one notices. When you talk too much, you hand over the map of your soul to people who don't know what to do with it. When you try to explain your point, your intention, your value, your story, you put yourself in a position that weakens your own authority. People measure you not by who you are, but by the neediness you show. And the world smells need like an animal smells fear. Silence, on the other hand, carries an elegant form of autonomy. A posture that says, I know who I am, and that's enough. Over time, you discover that most discussions are not searching for truth. They are searching for victory. People want to be right, not to understand. They want to prove something, not learn something. When you step into that game, you lose before you even start, because those who justify themselves too much end up placing their strength in the hands of those who never knew how to handle it. Silent dignity pulls you out of that theater. It puts you on a level where small fights can't reach you, and then you notice the beauty of this. Not reacting is not weakness. It is natural selection. It is letting the emotional dust of others settle on its own. It is watching the chaos from a distance, without placing your heart as a hostage to empty arguments. The people who try to pull you out of your center begin to realize that their words find no space inside you, and that is unsettling. Because nothing scares someone who lives off conflict more than someone who lives off consciousness. Silent dignity is an internal mechanism of protection. It keeps you from selling yourself for crumbs of understanding. It keeps you from opening emotional doors to those who don't know how to enter. It keeps you from exposing vulnerabilities to those who only want ammunition. When you learn to speak only when necessary, your voice gains a different weight. It's not quantity, it's density. It's not frequency, it's purpose. If this truth resonates within you, subscribe to the channel now and comment, "My strength is in my silence." Your interaction keeps this message alive. The most curious thing is that people who truly have depth understand your silence immediately. They recognize that it's not disdain, it's wisdom. It's not avoidance, it's perception. It's not arrogance, it's selective awareness. Only those who have been hurt by excess transparency understand the value of a well-built wall. And only those who have matured emotionally understand that silence is also a language, one of the most sincere. Over time, you see that explaining too much was placing you in small places, shallow conversations, and fragile bonds. Now, your silence filters. It selects who can come closer. It protects your energy from invasions disguised as curiosity. When you grow quiet, the one who truly needs to understand you will take a step closer, not to confront you, but to comprehend you. The rest drift away because they can no longer manipulate what they don't understand. Silent dignity creates an invisible yet solid border, a line that separates your peace from the external world. When you establish it, something surprising happens. Your presence grows. You speak less, but you weigh more. You appear less, but you leave a stronger mark. You explain less, but you mean more. It is the paradox of someone who discovered that being respected is not about convincing. It's about existing firmly. And at some point you realize that silence is a teacher. It teaches you to interpret before responding, teaches you to observe before acting, teaches you to feel before speaking, teaches you to protect yourself before opening up. And this learning transforms your entire life, because it pulls you out of the role of someone who tries to be understood and leads you into the role of someone who simply is. But here is the final point of this block. When you stop explaining, you make it clear that your value is not available to be questioned, and when the world understands that, respect arrives, inevitable, late, but unbeatable. There is a kind of strength that no one sees coming. It is not born from shouting, nor from arguments, nor from well-crafted speeches. It is born in the silence of someone who finally understood that they no longer need to be read, interpreted, or translated. The world tries to push you onto the stage of explanation, as if you must always hand over the script of your intention. But when you don't show up for that performance, the game changes completely. You realize that true authority is not in speaking. It's in not moving when they expect you to react, and it is exactly in that pause, in that calculated absence, that people begin to see who you really are, because those who talk too much create noise, those who speak little create impact. Your energy starts to concentrate, your presence begins to thicken, and your silence becomes a kind of mirror that reveals the intentions of others. Some get uncomfortable because they can no longer manipulate you. Others draw closer because they finally see the depth you always had. It is in silence that your essence appears without interference. Over time, you notice something even more interesting. When you stop justifying yourself, you gain emotional selectivity. You quickly sense who asks with respect and who asks to control, who wants to understand and who wants to invade, who deserves an answer and who deserves distance. Silence gives you this radar, this fine reading of other people's intentions. It pulls you out of the autopilot of explanations and places you in a state of clarity that once seemed impossible. It's as if you could finally see the hidden architecture of relationships. And when that awareness touches you, everything changes. You realize that it is not your duty to translate your soul for those who don't have the vocabulary to comprehend it. You understand that keeping quiet is not bad manners. It is excess consciousness. You realize that refusing to argue is not rudeness. It is emotional maturity. At that point, you no longer try to prove anything. You simply live, simply observe, simply move forward. And that simple act becomes your greatest declaration of inner power. If this message pierces through you, subscribe to the channel now and comment, "I choose my peace over explanation." That keeps this reflection alive. After that, a curious phenomenon appears. People start to measure their words around you, not because you are scary, but because you no longer hand them the manual of your vulnerability. You no longer explain yourself. You no longer expose yourself for free. You no longer open doors that you will later need to close. Your silent posture creates a field of natural respect, almost magnetic. Suddenly, even those who once treated you with disregard begin to look at you differently. It's not magic, it's a boundary. And well-defined boundaries are irresistible. Silence also reveals what you couldn't see before, how much of your suffering came from the excess of detailing your life, your emotions, and your thoughts to people who had no emotional depth. Now you understand that over-explaining is like leaving your door unlocked. Anyone can come in, and not everyone who comes in knows how to leave. Silent dignity locks that door. Not to shut out the world, but to protect you from worlds that don't deserve your energy. And as you become more silent, you realize something even greater. Life responds differently to those who act with intention and speak only what is necessary. The universe seems to make room for this kind of person. Paths become clearer, relationships become lighter, conflicts dissipate because you no longer feed small battles. When you choose serenity, you stop being a participant in chaos and become an observer of it. That gives you control. That gives you an advantage. That gives you peace. Silent dignity also creates a rare kind of presence. The presence of the person who doesn't compete, doesn't beg, doesn't fight for space. You don't shrink yourself to fit, but you also don't exaggerate to stand out. You simply exist with firmness. And that is more powerful than any argument. Your silent existence begins to teach, to inspire, to organize how others behave around you. That's how the kind of respect that doesn't need to be asked for is born. And in the end, the truth is just this. When you stop explaining, you begin to exist in your highest form. Respect arrives because you stop negotiating your value. It arrives because you no longer need to be understood, only to be. It arrives because you became someone who doesn't explain, doesn't shrink, doesn't twist to fit into someone else's vision. Respect is an inevitable consequence of someone who chose silence as a form of dignity. There is a moment in life when you finally understand that your peace has a price, and that this price can no longer be negotiated. You begin to realize that most of the emotional exhaustion you carried wasn't from what people did, but from how much you tried to justify your choices to them. When you leave that behind, something inside you aligns. A kind of inner axis is born. And in that axis, you find the freedom to be without needing to convince. At that point, you discover a truth that is simple, but transformative. Those who are aware of their own value do not argue with those who are aware of nothing. You stop stepping into conflicts that lead nowhere. You stop trying to correct distorted perceptions. You stop getting stuck in conversations that don't deserve your depth. Your silence becomes your filter, your boundary, your protection. You save energy, time, soul. And in the emptiness of your words, the world begins to see how much you've evolved. The most curious thing is that silence makes more noise than any speech. People notice when you don't react. Notice when you don't justify yourself. Notice when you hold your posture even in the face of provocations. And this silent posture is unsettling for those who expected to see you lose control. It is unsettling for those who are used to your old version, the one that tried to explain everything. Now you move with a kind of firm elegance, almost unreachable. And in this new presence, something rare appears. Coherence. You speak little, but you live in a way that no one can contest. Your life becomes your argument. Your behavior becomes your manifesto. Your peace becomes your speech. When you act like this, respect doesn't need to be demanded. It simply happens. Because the world can see when someone has finally found emotional ground of their own. It can see when someone is no longer willing to be dragged by other people's expectations. If this touches you, subscribe to the channel now and comment, "My silence protects me." Your presence sustains this message. After that, an even deeper process begins. You learn to save explanations the same way a wise person saves money. You understand that every word is an investment, and not everyone deserves to receive that investment. The more you select, the more the world understands that your voice has weight. It's not pride, it's maturity. It's not coldness, it's responsibility with yourself. The one who speaks only when necessary becomes unmistakable. Silence also heals. It closes wounds that were opened when you over-explained yourself to those who never deserved to know so much about you. It shuts doors you left open out of naivety. It brings back pieces of you that were scattered in rushed justifications. When you grow quiet, you return to your inner world, and in there, where no one interferes, you recover what you lost trying to be understood. And something magical happens on this journey. You stop being predictable. Before, anyone knew how to provoke you, how to throw you off balance, how to push your explanations. Now they don't. Now you've become someone who responds with awareness, not impulse. Someone who calculates before giving. Someone who doesn't reveal what they think just because someone insisted. And this unpredictability is not coldness, it is refined self-protection. Silent dignity makes you someone rare, because in a noisy world, the one who masters silence masters themselves. And those who master themselves become untouchable. You stop reacting the way they expect. Stop justifying yourself the way they want. Stop molding yourself the way they demand. Your silence becomes your signature, your identity, your sacred ground. It is what sets you apart, what elevates you, what places you on a level where only those with true depth can reach you. And in the end, it all comes down to this. When you stop explaining, you create space for the world to see your strength, not your justifications. Respect comes not because you shout, but because you no longer need a voice to prove anything. It comes because you no longer beg for understanding. It comes because you are enough, and someone who is enough is someone the world eventually has no choice but to respect. There is a silent shift inside you when you realize you no longer need to fight over narratives with anyone, because every time you try to explain your side, you hand over your power, and every time you try to prove your intention, you walk away from your own truth. But when you stop, when you take a deep breath, when you decide that you won't justify anything anymore, the world begins to sense a new kind of presence in you. A presence that refuses to be measured by distracted eyes. From that moment on, you become someone who doesn't seek validation, someone who validates themselves, and that change irritates some but inspires many, because those who were used to your immediate explanations now feel the impact of your silence. An impact that says, I don't need you to agree, I just need to be loyal to myself. This is the moment when your maturity speaks louder than any sentence you could have said. It's interesting how, when you grow quiet, people start creating theories about you. Some think you're distant, others think you've changed, others believe you've grown cold. But the truth is, you've just stopped negotiating your energy with those who never knew how to hold it. You didn't change, you simply returned to the place you should never have left, your own consciousness. And that return is powerful. And from that return, a new rule for life is born. You speak when you need to, not when they ask. You answer when it's worth it, not when they demand. You open up when you feel truth, not when they insist. Your life begins to have a calmer, deeper, more solid rhythm. And that rhythm reconfigures what you tolerate, what you accept, and what you allow. Silent dignity becomes your new identity. If this touches you, subscribe to the channel now and comment, silence is also respect. Your energy strengthens this message. Over time, you realize that stopping explaining is stopping draining yourself. It is a mature form of emotional economy. You invest your time only where there is reciprocity. You give your voice only where there is depth. You open your heart only where there is real presence. This refinement doesn't distance you from people. It brings you closer to the right people, the ones who don't need you to translate who you are. And when those people appear, everything gets lighter, because they don't pressure you to justify yourself. They don't force you to expose yourself. They don't question you just to test your loyalty. They listen to you. They notice you, they feel you, and when you find that kind of presence, silence becomes a bridge, not a wall. What once was defense becomes connection, and that changes your entire emotional landscape. But the truth is, the world will still try to pull you back into small arguments, empty conversations, useless conflicts. It's just that now you already know. Reacting doesn't take you anywhere. You don't need to prove anything anymore. Silence, once heavy, is now comfortable. It doesn't imprison you. It frees you. It doesn't limit you. It protects you. It doesn't isolate you. It organizes you from the inside. And in this inner state of order, you realize that respect doesn't come from long explanations. It comes from clear boundaries. It comes from firm presence. It comes from posture. It comes from emotional self-control. Deep down, people respect those who don't crumble to please. They respect those who don't bow to convince. They respect those who know who they are, even in silence. And in the end, you understand that stopping explaining is not about giving up on communication. It's about choosing who your soul deserves to be revealed to. It's about not handing your truth to those who don't know how to handle truths. It's about letting the world talk while you live with purpose, and those who live with purpose never need justification. In the end, life shows you that dignity is not about winning arguments. It's about not needing them. That respect is not born from explanation, it's born from posture. That silence is not absence, it is concentrated strength. So take a deep breath, Marilo, and ask yourself, who are you still trying to convince? Why are you still explaining what should already be obvious? To whom are you opening doors that don't deserve to enter? If this message spoke to you, comment one word that describes what you felt, like the video, and subscribe so you don't miss the next insight. Did you like this, or do you want adjustments? Your full script is complete.